Hey folks, this is Chris with The Human Project. No surprise, I am excited about this episode. We're going to talk about one of our most favorite things to talk about, which is community. And specifically, in our series about emotions, this is our third episode in the series, we're going to talk about how does community help us with emotions? How do they help us see what's actually going on? How do we help paint a richness? And then we dive into a really practical tool on how we can help better listen to others and have others help us discover what's actually going on under the surface. So take a listen to this episode. Let us know what you think. Hey, Mark.
Hi, Chris.
Are you feeling jubilant today?
How did you know? That's spooky. And how are you?
I am chuffed.
Chuffed.
Hey, it's a British word.
He went there.
Yeah,
Chuffed.
no, I'm doing really good. I'm excited. I've enjoyed this emotion series so far, and this is part 3 of it.
Yeah.
And I'm most excited. I think I start every single podcast intro with, I'm excited.
Because you are.
Because I am about these episodes. I love just being able to talk about this stuff. I think it's stuff that we don't talk about enough. And so talking about it, giving people space to hear it and then be able to process it, that's my goal. Not just my goal. I think that's our goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This emotion thing is part of the human experience. That's what God intended to be part of the human experience. It's not all, certainly.
Yeah.
And yet it is there. So this is an area that many people will end up in an extreme on, as we said in the first episode. Yep. So just love exploring how we do this in healthy ways. And so last time we talked about emotional vocabulary a bit. How do we grow, build, and expand our emotional vocabulary? And we talked about that both in terms of breadth. I don't think we used that word, but breadth as far as the different types of emotions like happy, sad, etc. Mad, whatnot. But also in terms of like gradients, I think was a word we used because we use a lot of color analogies in that episode. Of, just a little bit of this or a really this. So, we could be kind of happy, we could be pleased, or we could be jubilant or overjoyed or something like that. And that those are also ways of growing our emotional vocabulary and understanding then, which was where we went with that. Understanding, just kind of testing ourselves, getting multiple emotion words, kind of looking at them and saying, hey, what am I feeling? Is it more this or that? And kind of doing some almost paint chip type of comparison to say, what is it that I'm feeling right now? And that way we understand ourselves better and what we're feeling and what's going on underneath the surface.
Yeah. Am I feeling more of a pearl white or an eggshell? They're the same. So today, where we want to transition it to is talking about emotions in community. So this is a term that I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot, and it's come up a couple times in other episodes. When we say community, what do we mean when we say community? How would we define that?
Wow. Yeah. The first part of that is just relationship. Let's just say it's multiple human beings together, which means there's some sort of relationship going on there. In a deeper way, let's take word nerd alert number 1 for this episode. Let's take the word community apart a little bit. It's like common unity is a way that I remember that we're talking about. There's something that pulls this group of humans together. What's holding us together? There's a unity of some sort, usually a common goal, a common purpose, a common set of values or something of that nature that pulls us together. So it's a group of humans in a relationship that have something that's holding us together.
Yeah, that's good. I'm sure we'll talk and dive deeper into that in a future episode.
That's like a taste test.
Right, yeah. Can't stop us on that one. But where do you see emotions coming up in community? Where do you see that typically done today? And then what would we invite people into with community and emotions?
That's a multi-layered question. I'm confident I will forget anything but the first question I start to answer. But those are all really important questions for us to explore. In community, I'll start here. In community, one of the elements of community is also that there are standards. We might use the word culture here as well, but there's some standards or boundaries, those kind of things. And in relation to emotion specifically, there are typically boundaries that are just boundaries. Again, I'm not trying to judge, say they're good or bad at this point in time, but there are boundaries, emotionally speaking.
Like, I think I've mentioned this in the first episode. My friend that goes to church and is told,
yes,
like, not explicitly, but you are expected to be happy when you're here. Right. Nothing else matters. You're expected to show up happy, and if not, you're seen as difficult or
broken.
Yeah, something's broken.
Yep. Yeah. That's a great example, an unfortunate example, but a well-suited example, I should say, of this exact thing. Emotional boundaries in community are almost always, in fact, I have rarely seen them not be implicit, not explicitly stated. And yet you can recognize them when something happens outside of those boundaries and like the air leaves the room, everybody's like, what's going on?
Yeah.
He's angry or he's not happy or whatever the case might be. It's like, what is that? We don't even know what to do with that. There's some part of that, and if I go now back to judgment in a sense, there's some part of that that's healthy. It can keep us in bounds and recognize when we're doing something that is unhealthy for ourselves. Let's say shame, which we can argue might not be an emotion, but the emotions related to shame might be something that in community we would recognize is not healthy for us, because that is an area we go like, there's danger here. And of course, you just described an example on the other side of that coin, where we'd say, if we are not allowed to be anything but happy, what happens on those days when we aren't happy? When we are legitimately grieving the loss of a parent, maybe, or something like that. That's potentially a challenging situation where emotions that are not fitting in the category of happy would be healthy to experience.
Yeah, I love that, of cultural norms for emotions. And I rarely see something that is healthy in what it looks like biblically. There's, in one of the classes that we teach, there's this, like, if we look at it biblically, community, bearing each other's burdens and that kind of stuff. Burden versus load.
Yeah.
And I think that there are things that we expect to be a load, which is more light, and burdens are more community oriented. And there's this cultural norm that everything is everybody's own individual responsibility.
Okay.
And there's elements of that. Like, yes, you need to own your feelings, own your emotions, own your perceptions, own reality. But also, I think this is why a lot of people have gotten burned by the church. Is they come grieving and they come needing help. They're told, you're broken. You're not welcome here.
Yeah.
Which is the antithesis of what Jesus called us to do.
Yeah.
And I'm very thankful that, like, there are big exceptions to that rule.
Yeah.
Like the community I'm part of welcomed me in at one of my most broken spots. And I know the same is true for you and where you go. But cultural norms in community around emotions.
Yeah.
Like, what does good look like for that? What do you think Jesus is calling us into with good community?
I'll use the example from the Jewish culture of sitting Shiva, since you brought up grieving, sitting Shiva, that the first move in that community when somebody is grieving is to go be with them.
I don't know what that means, sitting
It's
Shiva.
literally, there's a lot of elements to it. I'm just highlighting the part of it. It is just being with the person who is grieving. You're not coming with a solution. You're not even coming with words. Sit with. Period. That's the end.
Oh, so that's a phrase.
That's what you're going to do. Yeah, I know it sounds kind of weird when it's translated to English, but that's it. Go be with the person. They're where they're at, and we talked about this in previous episodes too, but being with somebody who's there in that spot is the first thing.
So sitting Shiva, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Connect with the person.
So that's
first and foremost. That's a human. They're feeling a real emotion. They're expressing something of feeling a real emotion. Be with them in that situation, I think, would be the first thing that I would see. That's how the Jewish community walks out what they understand of God's intent in this.
So I want to call out that that's not just larger community, and I think that's important for us when we talk community, is it can be of all sizes.
Yeah.
Whether it's just 2 people, 2 families, 200 people.
Right. What about you? What would you say in community healthy looks like? What's an example for you?
I always want to take it back to biblical standards.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think you look at the first century church.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were practices that they had for healthy community, and one was just being with each other. I love that phrase, like sharing life together.
Okay.
Like they were together.
Yeah.
And I think of like a lot of us look back at like our college days and days that we had deep friendships or we do ministry with people. Mine was a very strange experience.
Yeah.
But I was working alongside the same people we were working 100 hours a week together in ministry. Mm-hmm. And we were still together the other hours that we weren't actually working. And to this day, still, one of those guys is still one of my closest friends.
Yeah.
But we got to experience so much depth of emotions together. We got to see everything.
Yeah.
Similar to like you and I as business partners.
Yeah.
Like we get the good and we get the bad.
Yeah.
Same is true with like families, etc. You see the real things of what's happening with people. And I think that's a good example of what good, healthy community looks like, is we see it from the angle and the perspective of what's real life look like. And I think that's really healthy to look at it from that perspective.
So if we go back to the example of your friend experiencing a community that had a very narrow range of acceptable emotions, I hear you describing kind of some of the opposite, and part of the way to get to the opposite is do more of life than show up for like an event every week, basically, where you can manage to put on a show if you need to. I'm not saying everybody there was doing that, but I'm saying, if you can make something happen for an hour or two a week, right? But if you are, as you say, in business together, if you're having meals together on a regular basis, if you're doing enough of life together, it's gonna happen. You're gonna have the emotions experienced and in all directions. And that's part of how community can help you understand and express those. Is that where you were going with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I just want to acknowledge for people listening, that can sound really, really scary. Mm-hmm. Like people seeing the real you seeing the real of other people.
Right.
Like that's terrifying. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing we talked about in the connection episode of being known and being loved.
Right.
Like that's calling at both of those things. Mm-hmm. Like, am I actually being authentic about who I am, and will people actually accept me for that?
Yeah.
And emotions are an even trickier portion of that, beyond just seeing actions. Inviting people in to experience things how I'm experiencing them or feeling them, it's a whole different depth of vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that can be really scary. So I just want to make sure we acknowledge that. But
we can feel fear. We can have the emotion of fear over that invitation.
And there is deep, deep richness there.
Yeah.
Just like we talked about emotional vocabulary last time, this is how you see life in full color. Mm-hmm. Community is how you see life in full color. And being able to share those emotions, being able to have people help provide different perspectives. Like if they just ask us, like, so it seems like you're feeling ecstatic about this, or it seems like you're feeling grieved about this. Mm-hmm. That just invites, like, I'm trying to be understood.
Yeah.
I think that's the power. We talk about empathy a lot.
Right.
I think that's the power of that, being able to see that. You start to feel a little bit of that known and loved.
Yeah. To connect this back to what we talked about last episode, we were talking about our emotional vocabulary. We could put that in the category of self-awareness. Yeah. Like I'm aware of what my emotions are. One of the other ways to do this paint chip comparison to understand is to see others experiencing emotions and expressing them or trying to express them. That helps in both directions. Yep. You just gave an example of somebody reflectively listening to me, maybe that would help me understand my own emotions. Sure. And as I see you expressing emotions, expressing things from emotions, I can also understand myself better as I'm trying to understand you better. It's both sides of that coin are happening at the same time. So my other awareness of emotions is helping my self-awareness of emotions, which helps my other awareness of emotions. It's just it's relationship ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly in the context of emotions, when you start building trust with somebody, because emotions don't always tell us the full story.
Mm-hmm.
They're an indicator light, but it could be a
Right.
false indicator light.
It could be.
Could be pointing at something that's not actually there. So like shame, it's a great example of it.
Mm-hmm.
Is what's going off on the indicator actually healthy? And we're going to dive deeper into this in the next episode, talking about what's actually going on, how does that reveal other things that are happening. But in community, if it's just us trying to do that by ourselves, we have no hope of doing that because all we see is our own perspectives.
Yes.
And so community invites other perspectives to say, oh, interesting, what's actually going on? And then when we invite and we're open to other people being able to share and speak lovingly into that, then it opens up just this wonderful, you go from the 64 crayon box to the 128 crayon box.
1,000 crayons.
Yeah, there's tons. Macaroni and cheese, I remember, was a color.
Oh, that's crazy. I wonder how many kids have tried to eat that crayon.
Or Purple Mountain's Majesty. Actually, my mom likes to tell the story that I pulled out violet when I was a kid, and I said, Mom, I can't play with this color because it's violent.
So close.
Yeah.
It's also purple, which is a nasty, evil color. So it doesn't want it.
For you. Yeah.
For me, a colorblind person that I am.
I think the important thing to call back to beyond this colors is experiencing emotions in community, having other perspectives, other input, and being able to see what is actually true and what's actually going on is important in community.
One really, I guess you'd almost say tactical or practice-oriented thing that I've seen be powerful in community is reflective listening, which you just referenced a minute ago. So it's a super simple thing to do. It sounds like you're feeling, emotion word because of, what's going on, the thought, action, whatever it might be.
Yep.
I think it's pretty tactical or practice-oriented thing that can be helpful in community. We've seen it be very powerful. Very simple. It's reflective listening. You just referenced it a minute ago. And I remember as we teach classes about this all the time, there was one class in particular, somebody asked a question that took me off guard and ended up being the most beautiful question. Given my nickname question mark, I really appreciated what this person asked. Because we were talking about this reflective listening. So it sounds like you're feeling emotion about thought, right? And somebody said, why wouldn't I just ask them what they're feeling? I thought, why don't we ask people what they're feeling? Why are we reflecting back? It sounds, that's not a good thing to do. I'm handing someone an emotion or trying to label their emotion or something that could turn to an unhelpful thing. But it's the reflective part. Yeah. It's the reflecting. It's literally holding up a mirror. And when it's held tentatively, which reflective listening is intended to be, so it sounds like maybe, it's like a question, right? It sounds like you're feeling this. It gives the other person an opportunity to look at that and react to it. Just like the paint chip comparison we've been talking about in the last episode and this one. So if you just say, what are you feeling? If I'm trying to build an emotional vocabulary, I might just shut down or say, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that is.
Or a false of what I'm expected to say.
Yeah. Like, I'm happy.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to reflect an emotion and do it very tentatively and invite a response or reaction to it and not expect that it's perfect, that gives the other person a chance to actually say, let me compare what I am feeling to what was just said.
Yeah.
And then what happens to the other person? It's so weird. That person actually learns more about what they're feeling.
Yeah.
Because of that. That's the power of community.
Yeah. And it's so beautiful to see. We've got it, like you said, we teach classes about this and get to see people experience it and think like, oh yeah, I'm a really good listener. And then they go, oh, I got some work to do.
We see it in that conversation perspective as well. If we leave the emotion out of that reflection, the conversation stays at the surface. But if emotion's brought into it, people are invited to a deeper level of understanding and connection as well. Yeah. So emotion's key in this.
Quick recap here. Let's give the practice again. So that way folks can take this, start to practice it. And if they want to learn more, they can come to a class.
Yeah.
So what's the practice of reflective listening?
Yep. Very simply, as you're listening to somebody, try to identify what they might be feeling and what it's about. And then reflect it back to them as a question. Am I following? Sounds like whatever, you're feeling this because of that. Is that right? Let them react to it.
Nice. Love it. So practice reflective listening. let us know what you think. And if that's helpful, I want to hear your feedback on that.
Yeah.
So community. So emotions, great signals, build our emotional vocabulary, do it in community. Then what we're going to talk about next episode is how do we regulate our emotions and keep them healthy? How do we take action, healthy action on our emotions? So we'll see you next episode.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. Behind the microphones, you've got myself, Mark Wavle, Chris Conlin, and our lead editor, Derek Donley. We are a crowd-funded nonprofit. Most of what we do is free because of your generous support. So thanks for joining us in our mission to bring 1 million lives closer to fullness in God's design. To support us financially or to learn more, visit us at humanproject.us. See you next time.